Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Halo Wash Processed Ethiopia from Coffee Collective. And there's the bag right there. And Coffee Collective based out of Copenhagen, Denmark, and they're a coffee roaster that needs no introduction as they're one of the most well-known coffee roasters in the entire world, as well as a coffee roaster that we have featured on the channel several times before. This is essentially the third and final part of what was a lighter profiled washed Ethiopian series this week, as let's be real, sometimes we all need a break from the crazy out there experimentational coffees or natural processed coffees and just kind of go back to the roots and get some really clean, nice washed Ethiopian coffees. So this right here is day 27 of this coffee. And Coffee Collective does have a recipe on their website. So we went with the recipe, which is a 15.625 to 1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 203 degrees Fahrenheit through the Chemex, of course. And this is a light Nordic for the roast profile. And let's start discussing this coffee. So day 15, which was the first time we tried it, so we at the very least gave it 2 weeks worth rest. It was wonderfully clean and sweet, and that was our first impression, and that was a really nice first impression. Anytime you get wonderfully clean and sweet, it's a great start. Pretty clean, distinct mango, a very positive first impression. Really like this coffee right off the bat. Day 16, building on that positive first impression, was another wonderfully clean cup. Sweet, bright, dark, fleshy fruits in abundance. Pretty delightful cup of coffee. Great first couple of days. Day 17, adjusted it to their recipe. So originally we were just going with our standard recipe, but after adjusting it to their recipe, we decided it does work really well both ways. So we were getting a bit of citrus in the cup as well, and mostly maintaining its distinct fruit and floral forward components in this cup of coffee. Yeah, definitely sounds like our coffee. Sweet, fruity, floral. Yeah, definitely our type of coffee. Day 19, slightly more citric in the cup today, as it was definitely a fair bit of what they have listed as a bergamot, and we've had our fair share of coffees that we could identify as bergamot. Definitely seeing that here. Seemingly the most dominant flavor in the cup of coffee. Still pretty sweet, still pretty clean, pretty delightful cup of coffee. Day 21, trademarks, sweet and clean, as the coffee was getting a slight bit more of this orange candy sweetness that we are very much enjoying, as well as a slight bit of this dessertiness. We could call this a desserty coffee, as some people like to describe wines as desserty. Could from time to time describe this as a desserty coffee, especially in the earlier days of this coffee. And then the profile as a whole was taking much more shape as it had this citric finish. So it was sweet right off the bat, somewhat desserty, finishing off into a nice citric finish. Day 23, we're getting a slight bit of a grainy taste, and it settled down into a pretty clean citrus fruit, pretty consistent with a lot of the other days, kept our notes to a minimum for that day. And then day 25, our final notes we have for this coffee, definitely seen an overall shift, as the primary component of this coffee was initially these lighter and darker stone fruits, thinking mango, thinking plums, before it shifted into a more pronounced lime and orange flavor, so a lot more citric by the end. And it was the finishing flavor notes, as well as maintaining a nice bit of sweetness throughout consuming this coffee. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. All right, and we made this tasting wheel a little later in the coffee, so that's why the stone fruit is lower at level 3 and the citrus fruit is higher at level 4. In the earlier days, I think that's probably the one major thing that you're switching. The stone fruit's probably higher at level 4 and the citrus fruit is probably lower at a level 3. But other than that, the tasting wheel should be extremely consistent for the most part with everything else. Yeah, we went there, cleanliness level 5. Anytime we put the cleanliness at a level 5, it is definitely worth noting. This was a super clean cup of coffee, and that's a wonderful way to go about this cup of coffee. Finish level 3, that's about right. Sweetness level 4, we've been harping on the sweetness. It has a wonderful amount of sweetness to it, and they kept the acidity to a minimum, as the acidity just stays at a level 2 for this cup of coffee. Florals level 3. Bitterness, that's going to come from the bergamot, this kind of citric finish to it, so this lime. Just a slight bit of bitterness to it, and body, of course, it's going to be lower, as you would imagine, wash process Ethiopia. But for the most part, really like the way that this tasting wheel looks. Definitely not too much else worth discussing in terms of the tasting wheel. All right, our overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. This is on the better end of washed Ethiopians that we've had this year. Really thoroughly enjoyed this cup of coffee, and that's why we saved this one for the third and final of these lighter profiled washed Ethiopian reviews, as this one stood out to us between those three coffees as our favorite. I think it's an excellent done cup of coffee, and this does kind of It makes things interesting with Coffee Collective because we've had our fair share of Coffee Collective coffees. Like, we tried the Akmel that they have right now, the natural processed Ethiopia, that we did not like, and we did not like their anaerobic earlier this year. But that being said, there's this coffee, and there was the Bolivian Gesha that we're pretty big fans of. So it seems like it's one of those things with Coffee Collective where we either love the coffee or we're not too fond of the coffees. But this one was one of those coffees that we really enjoyed. Terrific job by Coffee Collective on this one. Type of person we would suggest this coffee to. Obviously, you have to enjoy your lighter profiled coffees, but most specifically looking for something super clean, something that does have a nice bit of the stone fruits, especially at the start, and something that has more of a citric component towards the end, especially if you're going to let the coffee rest a little bit more. And the sweetness is really nice. Probably our favorite part of this cup of coffee, as the sweetness was present throughout the entire time of drinking this coffee. Roll that all up into one, and that's what you should be expecting from this pretty nice and delightful washed Ethiopian coffee. But I think we're going to leave this at that. If you have by chance had an opportunity to try this Halo, we'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well as anything from Coffee Collective, as Coffee Collective seems like somewhat of a divisive coffee roaster, as some people do genuinely just love their coffee, and some people are a little more lukewarm on them. And as we mentioned, we're kind of in between. Some are spectacular and some are just okay for us, but would love to know your thoughts as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Halo Wash Processed Ethiopia from Coffee Collective. Thank you for watching.